"You're coming with me." The words cut through smoke and sirens like a blade. A beam of flashlight sliced the darkness of the stairwell, catching a flash of a woman in a charcoal suit, heels skidding. Hair damp from the sprinkler mist, one hand braced on the steel railing, the other clamped to her ribs. "Get that door open," she snapped, voice steady but breathless. Already did. The man in a blue janitor uniform kicked a rubber wedge into place and leaned into the buckling fire door. "Name's Miles. Can you walk? I can lead," she said. Jaw tight. "I don't follow." A cough ripped through her sentence. She swayed. Miles stepped forward, caught her forearm with a grip that said, "Both. I've got you, and don't argue." Smoke drifted up the shaft like a gray tide. Somewhere below, an alarm stuttered, then died, then came roaring back alive. "Power surge," he muttered. "We'll take the service corridor. Fewer people, less panic." "I know this building," she said, stubborn. "I run it." "I clean it," he said without a flinch. "Tonight, I run this part." He shrugged off his rain slicker and draped it over her shoulders. The plastic crackled like thunder. For a second, she looked like a woman wearing armor that didn't belong to her. Then she squared her shoulders and made it fit. They moved. Down 3 steps, a landing, 2 more flights, breath loud in the damp air. Emergency lights flickered red, then black. When the darkness swallowed them whole, the flashlight beam steadied the kind of steady that comes from practice. It wasn't his first alarm. It likely wasn't his first promise. "Left," she said at a landing, memory mapping corridors in her head. "Server room's that way. If this is sabotage—" "Right," Miles corrected, guiding her with gentle pressure. "Server room will be a bonfire and a fight. Right is the auxiliary exit with the bad hinge and the better odds." She gave him a sideways look. "You catalog hinges. I catalog everything that could get someone hurt." They turned. The corridor narrowed, smell of wet drywall and hot metal. A ceiling tile dropped and shattered behind them. Sprinklers hissed, then a spark cracked and the hiss became a rain. Their shoes splashed through it. A young analyst appeared out of nowhere, coughing eyes wide. "I can't find the—" he started. Miles pressed the flashlight into the kid's hand and turned it toward the green exit sign. "Go. Don't run. Breathe through your collar. Keep your head down." The kid nodded, half-bowed toward the woman. "Ms. Whitaker." "Go," she ordered, voice even. When he disappeared, she whispered, "Thanks." "You're bleeding," Miles said, noticing a thin ribbon of red beneath her sleeve. She made a face that might have been dismissal or might have been pain. "Glass. I'm fine." A buzzing vibrated in his pocket. He eased her to a halt near a junction box, fished his phone out, glanced at the screen. A child's name glowed, Lily. He answered on speaker. "Hey, Bean. Daddy." The little girl's voice was sweet and sleepy, a soft bell in the storm. "You promised story time." "I know." He kept his tone light. "The building's grumpy tonight." "Is the grumpy building scarier than the dragon book about the same?" he said. "Who's that?" Lily asked, clearly, clocking the silhouette leaning on him. The CEO straightened. "Sloan," she said, surprised at herself for offering it. Sloan Lily repeated, tasting it. "Are you nice?" Sloan blinked. She ran companies, not bedtime interrogations. "I'm working on it." Miles smothered a choke of laughter. "We are being very nice to emergency exits." "That's good," Lily decided. "Daddy, don't forget the inhaler in your left pocket." "You always forget." "Copy that," he said gently. "I'll be home soon." "You better," Lily said. "And Sloan." "Yes." Sloan asked, caught. "Be safe. Daddy always tries to save everything." The call ended. For a beat, the rain from the sprinklers felt warmer. Sloan looked at him. "You have a kid." "Sure do." "And you're here." He lifted one shoulder. "This is where the fire is." They pushed through a door that groaned like it had complaints of its own. The service corridor opened to a catwalk above a loading bay. Below, smoke rolled in slow waves. A metal dumpster smoldered like a sullen campfire. The alarm wailed, then chopped off mid-cry, then the building exhaled as backup generators kicked on, humming like a deep-bellied animal. Sloan pointed. "Stairwell B will be jammed. C's under renovation." D is rusty, but honest, he said. Like you, she shot back oxygen and adrenaline, making her reckless. He smiled without teeth. Honest anyway. He took the lead, testing each step, weight low, shoulders squared. At the base of the catwalk, steam rose from a cracked pipe. He brushed his palm near it, hissed at the heat, then angled his body to shield her as they passed. At the next door he tugged. It stuck. He set his boot, leaned, and the metal shrieked before giving up. They spilled into an alley that smelled like rain, hot wires, and the city's heartbeat. The storm owned the night. Rain strafed sideways. Police lights pulsed at the far end of the block, blue and red, smearing across puddles. Firefighters moved like orchestral percussion, certain timed, controlled. Someone shouted Sloane's name. She turned. Cameras flashed through the curtain of rain, paparazzi wielding telephoto lenses like spears. Miles put a hand at the small of her back. Head down. Walk. You don't have to touch me, she said on instinct, a reflex honed in boardrooms where touch meant manipulation. Right now, he said, I do. He steered her beneath a metal awning and peeled off his slicker. The plastic cape was ridiculous against the storm, but it bought them seconds. Water rattled overhead. He scanned for risk with a soldier's focus and a father's inventory, dark corners. Loose Cable's car idling with lights off. EMS is over there, he said. You need oxygen. I need to find who did this, she said, eyes already calculating, and you need to keep breathing to do that. She opened her mouth with a corporate retort, then shut it. Fine, briefly. They moved again, two figures cutting through the rain's warp. A paramedic looked up, recognition flickering. Whitaker. I'm all right, she said automatically. Define. All right, Miles murmured. The paramedic checked her vitals under the tent. Pulse quick, oxygen low. Sloane watched the numbers as if they were a volatile stock. A mask hovered. She hesitated a fraction of a second too long. Miles took it, set it gently against her face. She let him. Breathe, he said. In through the nose. Out like you mean it. A cough shook her. The mask fogged, then cleared. The paramedic nodded. You'll live. I'm very busy, Sloane said dryly into the mask. I plan to. She stood to leave. The paramedic blinked. Wait, ma'am, you really should? She will, Miles said. After we find her a ride. A ride? She squared on him. To where? My place, he said like it was the only geography that made sense. You're not going home, and the hospital is a press conference with needles. You presume? Yeah, he said, unbothered. I'm presuming you value not getting trampled by strangers with lenses. Cameras popped again, closer now. Someone shouted, Sloane. Did you torch your own building for insurance? Another voice. Meaner, who's the janitor boyfriend? Sloane's eyes flashed anger, shame. Something proud enough to refuse both. She set her shoulders, but the rain stole heat and courage with equal efficiency. Miles didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Look at me, he said. She did. You can hold your ground here and give them a show, he said quiet. Or you can come with me and keep your power. That sounds like a line, she said. It is, he admitted, but it's true. Lightning split the sky into veins. Thunder rolled off the glass and steel. He reached up, tucking a soaked strand of hair away from her eyes with a hand so careful it felt like a promise. Just for tonight, he added. You call the shots after. Something in her, a lifetime of command. A habit of control met something in him, a lifetime of triage, a habit of protecting. Their edges found a fit. Fine, she said. Just tonight. A sleek black SUV nosed up to the curb, unmarked windows tinted. A door cracked, a man's profile in the back seat. Miles shifted, blocking her view instinctively. That yours? He asked. Victor, she said under her breath, a name like a warning flare. He's not your ride, Miles decided. She almost smiled. Almost. You give orders like you own the place. I own a $4 wedge and a pair of boots that know when to move. He tilted his head toward the far end of the alley. My truck's that way. Cameras surged as they stepped out from the awning. A flash caught the exact moment Sloane stumbled and reached for the only steady thing in the storm, the man in the faded blue uniform. His arm went around her automatic. In the instant before the thunder swallowed the street, a lens captured it. Power in exile, leaning into the hands of a man no one saw coming. They vanished into rain so heavy it might as well have been a curtain. The truck's wipers fought a losing battle against the Seattle rain, streaking the windshield into a blur of lights and shadows. Miles drove with both hands on the wheel, jaw-set eyes scanning the wet streets. Beside him, Sloane sat wrapped in his rain slicker like it was a lifeline she hadn't meant to take. Her phone kept lighting up on the console calls from numbers she knew too well, but she didn't touch it. They turned off the main road, the city's hum fading into the low groan of wind through narrow streets. Miles's place wasn't far, but each minute stretched with the weight of what neither of them was saying. "You always drive this quietly?" she asked, her voice steady, though her fingers tightened on the edge of the seat. "Noise makes people miss what matters," he said. She studied him. "And what matters right now? That you're still breathing. That you're not out there in that mess." She almost laughed. "You say that like you've made a habit of collecting strays." Miles's eyes stayed on the road. Only the ones worth saving. Before she could decide how to answer, they turned into a narrow driveway beside a squat brick building with peeling paint. A faded sign above the front stoop read, "Rosemont Apartments," the kind of place you passed without noticing. Miles parked and came around to her side, offering a hand she didn't take until her heels slipped on the wet pavement and she caught his forearm. His grip was steady, unshakable. He didn't smirk or comment, just guided her toward the side entrance. Inside, the building smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and rain-soaked coats. A warm voice called from somewhere ahead. "Miles, that you?" A small woman stepped into view from an open door, silver hair braided down her back, eyes sharp despite the soft smile. She wore a quilted robe and thick wool socks. "Evening," Mrs. Torres Miles said. "Sorry to bother." "You never bother," she cut in. Her gaze shifted to Sloane, taking in the damp hair to suit the exhaustion just under the surface. "And who's this? Don't tell me you finally brought home someone with better shoes than you." Sloane blinked. She hadn't been read so quickly in years. "Sloane Whitaker," she said, extending a hand. Mrs. Torres took it with both of hers. "You look cold, mija, and tired. I'll make tea." "That's not necessary," Sloane started, but Mrs. Torres was already bustling away. Miles gestured down the hall. "She'll be offended if you refuse, and she's stubborn. Trust me." They stopped at a basement door with 2 locks, 1 deadbolt, 1 latch. He unlocked both, stepped aside for her to enter. It was small, but not cramped. A narrow living room opened into a kitchenette. Beyond that, a short hall led to 2 bedrooms. The place smelled faintly of cedar and clean laundry. A shelf by the door held a jumble of boots, sneakers, and a tiny pair of pink rain boots that had clearly seen better days. "This is home?" she asked, setting her bag on the couch. "Home enough," he said. "Lily's room's down the hall. She's at her aunt's tonight." Her eyes drifted to a corkboard on the wall. Photos, most of a little girl with Miles's eyes mixed with scraps of paper covered in crayon drawings. One showed a stick figure man with what looked like a mop in one hand and a sword in the other. "That you?" she asked, pointing. "Depends," he said, pulling off his jacket. "If it's the mop, yes. The sword, that's artistic license." Mrs. Torres arrived a moment later, balancing 2 mugs and a plate of shortbread cookies. "Eat," she ordered, setting them on the coffee table. Sugar helps after a shock. "I'm fine," Sloane began, but Mrs. Torres' raised eyebrow cut her short. Miles watched her take the first sip of tea, the steam curling against her face. For the first time since the fire, her shoulders dropped half an inch. "You said this wasn't a random fire," he said quietly. Her eyes met his over the rim of the mug. "It wasn't. I smelled accelerant before the sprinklers kicked in, and the alarms, they shouldn't have failed. Not in my building." "Your building," he repeated, not as a question. She gave a bitter smile. "Not for long. Someone wants me out, Miles, and they're willing to burn everything to do it." His gaze stayed steady on hers. "Any idea who won?" name she said. "Victor Lang." Miles' expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted alert like a hunter hearing movement in the brush. Why? Control. Money. And because he's never forgiven me for voting him down 2 years ago, I stopped him from pushing through a merger that would have gutted the company. Now the board's leaning his way. Before he could respond, her phone buzzed again. She glanced at the screen. The name Victor lit in white letters. She didn't answer, but Miles caught the flicker in her eyes. Anger, yes, but also something else. Why not block him? He asked. Because knowing what he's saying is safer than wondering. She set the phone down, untouched. Outside, rain ticked against the small basement windows. Mrs. Torres returned to her apartment with a parting lock, both Miles. Weather's getting worse. Miles checked the deadbolt, then turned back to her. You'll stay here tonight. Tomorrow, we'll figure out the rest. Sloane straightened. You don't even know me. I could be a terrible house guest. I'll take my chances, he said. Besides, terrible house guests don't usually come with arsonists in pursuit. She surprised herself with a small laugh. Do you always diffuse tension with dry humor? Only when it works. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight. She leaned back into the couch mug warm in her hands and studied the man who had stepped into her disaster without hesitation. Why help me? She asked finally. His answer was simple, almost too simple. Because you needed it. And for reasons she couldn't name, that was enough for tonight. Miles slid the second deadbolt home with a quiet click. The sound was small, but it settled something inside Sloane she hadn't realized was rattling. 2 locks, she asked, easing out of her ruined heels. Her ankle flexed. Pain flashed and vanished. Basement wisdom, he said. First lock keeps the weather out. Second one keeps the world out. He crossed to the kitchenette, his movements economical kettle on burner-lit towel thrown over his shoulder like he'd been born with it there. Sloane stood in the middle of the little living room, unsure where to put her hands. She was accustomed to rooms that belonged to her, the corner office with the skyline, the glass conference table where people waited before they spoke. Here she was a guest in a space the size of her old walk-in closet. She didn't hate it. She hated that she didn't hate it. Sit, Miles said. Let me clean that cut. I'm fine. She started, and then caught herself. That word had been her armor for a decade. Tonight, it felt thin as paper. She sat. He opened a tin box labeled in block letters. First aid, pulled out antiseptic and gauze. He kneeled gentle without being careful in a way that insulted. Tell me if the sting is too much. I grew up with 3 older brothers and a backyard full of blackberry brambles, she said, mouth quirking. I can survive antiseptic. More than survive, he said. That's your problem. She watched him work. The man had hands made for repair knuckles nicked from 100 small battles with stubborn things. The room hummed the kettle's low simmer, the heater's old lungs, the city breathing through concrete. On the corkboard above the little desk, Lily's artwork tacked up like flags, claimed after tiny victories, a purple dragon, a rocket ship, a smiling stick figure in a blue uniform with a crown. Sloane's gaze snagged on a printed schedule, custody hearing. Thursday, 9:00 a.m. She looked away before she could read the notes under it. You run a building by cataloging hinges, she said, and realized it wasn't a jab. It was observation. I run a life by knowing where things fail, he replied, taping gauze in place. His eyes flicked up to meet hers, and fixing what I can. Fix me, then, she said lightly, like a dare. He didn't blink. I don't fix people. I stand next to them until they remember how to stand. She swallowed. It landed. It lodged. The kettle clicked off. He poured hot water into 2 mugs. The tea smelled like peppermint and something sweeter, honey. He slid one toward her. You always keep your place this. She gestured at the room that somehow managed to be both spare and lived in. Orderly chaos takes more time, he said. She should have argued with that. Instead, she heard her father's voice, the one who taught her how to sort coins by year and shine, who said, You keep things tight, kid, the world keeps fewer surprises. He hadn't believed it enough to stick around. Her phone lit up on the coffee table. The name Victor Lang burned like a fuse. She let it go dark. It lit again. Miles nodded toward it. "You're going to either answer or throw it at the wall. Choose the one you won't regret." She exhaled through her nose. "Answering it is the one I'll regret." "Then put it on speaker," he said, "and don't stand close to a window." She smirked despite herself. She hit accept. Victor Sloan. His voice was all velvet and voltage. Background noise suggested a car, the whisper of tires on wet streets. "I hear you had a difficult evening. That's one word I prefer avoidable." A pause just long enough to cut. "You insisted on redundancy upgrades. They failed anyway. Because someone adjusted the timestamp, she said calm as glass. That isn't failure. That's intent." "Careful," he murmured. "It's late. People say careless things when they're tired." Miles moved without sound, wiped the counter, turned off the stove. He positioned himself where he could see both her and the door. He was building a map the way some men built fires, quietly, necessarily. "What do you want?" Victor Sloan asked. "What I've always wanted," he said. "For Whitaker and Vale to stop carrying dead weight. And who's dead weight today?" Another pause. His voice softened as if he'd leaned closer to the microphone. "You, if you insist on making enemies of your friends." She laughed, not kindly. "You are not my friend." "Not at the moment," he conceded. "But I could be useful. You're in a difficult position. Optics are unfortunate. The board could be merciful if you demonstrated a willingness to cooperate." "Cooperate," she repeated. "Resign," gracefully, he translated as if he were offering her a silk robe instead of a drop into the sea. "Before a narrative hardens around you that will be difficult to sand down." She closed her eyes. She could see him in her head, expensive suit, silver watch, the office lit like a private chapel. For years he had been the man who smiled when she was right and sharpened his knives when she was still right but inconvenient. "Tell the narrative to watch its step," she said. "It's entering a place with 2 locks." Miles glanced at her surprised, then allowed himself the smallest grin. Victor didn't laugh. "There's another matter." "Of course there is. The arson investigation," he said. "You'll face questions, not just about insurance." His voice thinned until it was almost tender. "About your habits, your temper, your relationships." The word hung between them like a drop of black rain. Sloan stared at her own reflection in the dark TV screen. Relationships. She'd had 4 in the last 10 years. All ended with polite statements and an emptier calendar. "Do what you have to do," she said. "So will I." A silence. When Victor spoke next, something human slipped around the edges, a weariness she'd never heard from him. "My son's tuition is due next week." It was so unexpected she didn't answer. Then carefully, "I didn't know you had a son. People don't pay attention unless you make them," he said, and there it was, an ache buried under iron. "He's good. He wants to be a pianist. Prep school. Scholarships don't cover everything." Sloan pictured him in his office, the framed photo she'd barely noticed before, a boy at a piano in a too-big blazer, fingers curved over keys like they knew where to go. She felt the smallest pull of gravity, empathy's quiet, annoying tug. "You're better when you talk like that," she said softly. "I'm better when I win," he replied, and the moment snapped. "Sleep well, Sloan." The line clicked dead. She stared at the phone as if it might confess. Then she placed it face down on the table like she was covering a mirror after a death. Miles leaned a hip against the counter. "He wanted you scared." "He got bored before he got me," she said, but her hands trembled and the mug warmed them back to steady. "Do you trust anyone on that board, Eleanor?" she said. "Maybe. When it suits her. She likes control more than she likes me. People who like control can be convinced by evidence," he said. "We'll get some. She looked up. He shrugged, a motion that somehow translated to obviously. "You don't need a bodyguard. You need a witness, preferably one who catalogs hinges." For the first time that night, her laugh shook loose from somewhere real. "You realize I'm not an easy house guest. You say that like it's news." She took another sip of tea. The mint soothed the ash in her throat. "Miles, thank you." For what he asked. For not asking questions you wanted answers to. "I only ask questions I earn," he said. "I'll ask some later." A small sound pattered down the hall. The soft hum of a machine, a nightlight buzzing faintly. The domestic choir of a house that had learned to sing quietly. Sloane stood and walked to the doorway of the second bedroom. She didn't enter, just stood there. The room was painted the color of watercolor skies. A bookshelf held picture books lined like soldiers pretending not to be silly. A plastic nebulizer sat on the dresser with a sticker that read, "Brave Breaths." On the wall, a paper banner spelled Lily in looped letters that wobbled but did not fall. She felt something she didn't have a word for, something like reverence and grief shaking hands. "Does she know how lucky she is?" she asked, still looking at the banner. "She knows I make terrible pancakes and good promises," he said. Sloane turned back to him. "I make great coffee and terrible exits." "Then we're complimentary," he said. The heater knocked once. Rain pawed at the egress window like a polite animal. She pulled the blanket from the arm of the couch and sat tucking it around her legs with the unapologetic efficiency of someone who'd slept in airports and boardrooms and once memorably on the floor of a server closet. Miles dimmed the lamp. "If you wake up to noise," he said, "it's just the pipes complaining." "And if it isn't?" she asked. "Then I have 2 locks and a plan," he said. She let her head tip back against the cushion. She thought of Victor's son, a boy bending over keys, and of Lily's banner that wobbled without falling. She thought of 2 locks holding their lines in a world built to pry. Something unspooled in her chest, not surrender, but permission. "Good night, Miles." "Good night, Sloane." In the dark, the room felt smaller, but the smallness was a blessing, fewer places for fear to hide. She closed her eyes and for the first time in a long time slept, because someone else was watching the door. The knock came just after sunrise. Sharp, deliberate, the kind that announced someone who expected to be heard. Miles opened the door to find Hattie Nguyen standing there, windbreaker zipped to her chin, hair pulled back in a no-nonsense knot. A notebook bulged from the pocket of her bag, and the expression on her face said she was already halfway into the conversation. "Miles." She stepped inside without waiting. Her eyes caught on Sloane, who'd just emerged from the hallway in an oversized sweatshirt that wasn't hers. "And you must be the CEO everyone's talking about." Sloane's chin lifted. Talking about or talking against Hattie's mouth ticked upward. "Depends who's paying for the coffee." She looked back at Miles. "We need to talk, both of you." Miles shut the door, sliding the deadbolt. "You don't usually come this far without a reason." "I have 2. Hattie said, dropping her bag onto the table. "First, the fire wasn't random. Second, your building's internal security logs are interesting." Sloane's voice went cool. "Define interesting." "They've been tampered with," Hattie said. She pulled out a stack of printed screenshots, timestamps, access logs, anomalies highlighted in yellow. The fire alarm's data feed was delayed by 3 minutes. Long enough to make sure the blaze had a head start before anyone could react. Sloane leaned closer, scanning the pages. Her jaw tightened. 3 minutes is the difference between a salvageable room and a total loss. "Exactly," Hattie said. "And whoever did it knew the system, knew how to bypass the backup. This isn't amateur work." Miles crossed his arms. "And you came to me because you work nights. You know who's where when the rest of the city's asleep," Hattie said. "And because you're the only person in that building who doesn't owe anyone a favor." Sloane looked at Hattie sharply. "You're saying this was internal." "I'm saying the logs point to someone with high-level access," Hattie said. "And I'm guessing you already have a name in mind." Sloane didn't answer right away. She turned one of the pages toward the light eyes narrowing at a particular code. "Victor." Hattie didn't blink. "That was my guess, too." Miles caught the shift in Sloane's posture tension laced with something else, something like guilt. "Say it," he told her quietly. She looked between them, the words heavy. 2 years ago, a compliance officer came to the board with evidence of financial irregularities in Victor's division. I voted to terminate him instead of investigate. Miles frowned. Why? Because it would have been messy, she said. Voice flat. Because we had a merger on the table and I thought protecting the company meant keeping it clean in the press, even if that meant getting my hands dirty in private. She swallowed. He was right, and I buried him. I told myself it was for the greater good. Hattie's gaze was level. And now you think this is payback? I don't think Sloane said. I know. The silence that followed was tight as wire. Miles broke it first. So you've been on both sides of the wrong decision. She met his eyes without flinching. And I'm standing here telling you because I don't plan on being on that side again. It was the kind of statement that could sound like spin in a boardroom. But here, with the rain ticking against the basement window and no cameras rolling, it sounded like something closer to confession. Hattie snapped her notebook shut. Then we need proof. The logs I have will raise eyebrows, but they won't close a case. We need the unedited backups, and those are only on the internal server offline, locked and backed up in the data vault on 27. Sloane's eyes sharpened. That room's badge restricted. Only executives and senior IT have clearance. And janitors, Miles said, deadpan. They both looked at him. He shrugged. I clean around the vault. I don't go in. But I know the guards, and I know when they're bored enough to wave me through without thinking. Hattie tilted her head. And you know the building's blind spots. I catalog hinges, he said, and the faintest smile ghosted across Sloane's mouth despite herself. But then her expression sobered. If we go after those logs, Victor will know. He'll see it as an escalation. Miles leaned forward on the table. He already set a fire under you. Escalation's done. Hattie slid a small recorder across the table toward Sloane. If you talk to anyone on the board between now and then, record it. Doesn't matter if it's just small talk. People get careless when they think they're safe. Sloane turned the device over in her hand. People get careless when they think you won't fight back, she murmured. Miles caught her gaze. And you will. She held his stare for 3 beats. I will. The moment hung there solid and unyielding. Hattie packed her things. I'll be in touch with the time. In the meantime, watch your doors. When the door shut behind her, the apartment felt smaller, heavier. Sloane walked to the window, watching rain thread down the glass. You're not going to tell me to stay out of it, she asked without turning. No, Miles said. I'm going to tell you to be ready for it. She glanced back. Why? Because you've got one shot to prove you're not the person you were when you buried that compliance officer, he said. And because I don't like cleaning up after cowards. Her mouth curved not in amusement, but in recognition of the hit. You think I'm looking for redemption? I think you're looking for the truth, he said. Redemption's just a bonus. For the first time in days, she felt the faintest stir of something that wasn't fear. It was sharper, steadier. Outside, the rain kept falling, but the air between them had shifted. They weren't just surviving the storm anymore. They were preparing to walk into it. The courthouse smelled faintly of old paper and strong coffee, the kind that had been poured since dawn and never really stopped. Miles sat at the petitioner's table, tie knotted too tight, hands folded in front of him. His boots felt out of place on the polished floor, but he didn't fidget. Across from him, his ex-sister-in-law whispered into the ear of her attorney a man with silver hair and a voice like sandpaper. The man kept glancing over the way a chess player checks the board before a risky move. Sloane slipped into the seat behind Miles, her presence announced only by the faint scent of peppermint tea. She leaned forward close enough for her words to land without carrying. You don't have to win by looking like you belong here. You just have to look like you belong with her. His shoulders eased a fraction. That I can do. The judge entered gavel down the usual formalities, and the air shifted into the stillness of a held breath. Miles's attorney, a wiry woman with steel in her gaze, began. Your Honor, we're here because my client, Mr. Carter, seeks primary custody of his daughter Lily. He has provided a stable home, steady employment, and a consistent presence in her life. The opposing attorney rose. Your Honor, while we respect Mr. Carter's dedication, the child's aunt offers a more advantageous environment, a larger home, higher income proximity to a private school. Sloane's eyes narrowed. She could read the subtext like a quarterly report wealth as shorthand for worth. The judge looked at Miles. "Mr. Carter, do you wish to speak?" He stood, voice steady but low. "Your Honor, Lily doesn't need the biggest house on the block. She needs to know that when she calls out in the night, someone's going to answer. She needs someone who knows she prefers strawberry jam but will eat grape if it makes the morning faster. She needs—" He hesitated, and for a moment the whole room leaned in. "She needs the same thing we all do, to be wanted, not managed." The judge's pen paused mid-note. The opposing attorney straightened. "Mr. Carter's hours are unconventional. He works nights. Who cares for Lily? Then—" Miles opened his mouth, but Sloane was already on her feet in the back row. "I do," she said. Every head turned. The judge blinked. "And you are Sloane Whitaker," she said evenly. "I've stayed in Mr. Carter's home. I've seen how he runs it. I've seen him leave a shift early to be at Lily's school play, and I've seen him turn down overtime because she had a fever." The silver-haired attorney pounced. "Ms. Whitaker, are you a relative?" "No," she said. "Just someone who believes in giving testimony when you've actually witnessed the truth." The judge allowed it barely, and Sloane sat again, her eyes meeting Miles's for a beat that said, "You're not standing alone in this room." The hearing wound on arguments volleying back and forth, but the air had changed. When it was over, the judge didn't rule custody hearings rarely end in one sitting, but she did schedule a home visit. "The court will require an environment evaluation before a decision is made," she said. Miles nodded. He'd expected as much. Outside, the rain had led up to a mist. They walked down the courthouse steps together. "You didn't have to stand up in there," he said. "Yes," she replied, "I did. Some people earn their silence. You haven't." A flicker of a smile crossed his face. "You might have just put yourself on the hook for telling a court how many times I burn toast." "I'll tell them it's part of your charm," she said dryly. He chuckled, the sound short but warm. When they reached the truck, his phone buzzed, a number he didn't recognize. He answered anyway. "This is Carter," he said. The voice was female professional. "This is Dana with Child Protective Services. We'll be conducting your environment evaluation tonight at 7. Miles frowned. "That's fast." "Court orders sometimes are," Dana said. "See you then." The line went dead. Sloane was watching him. "That's not standard, is it?" "No," he said slowly. "It's usually scheduled days out." Her gaze sharpened. "Victor?" Miles didn't answer, but the truth sat between them like a lit fuse. At 7 sharp, the knock came. A tall woman in a CPS badge stood in the doorway, clipboard in hand. She smiled, professional, but a touch too quick. "Evening. Mr. Carter, mind if I come in?" He stepped aside and she entered, scanning the apartment like a lens. Sloane was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled, prepping a small tray of cookies like it was the most natural thing in the world. Lily's room was neat books, stacked blankets, smoothed nebulizer in plain sight and clean. Dana checked boxes on her form. "Who's this?" she asked, nodding toward Sloane. "Friend of the family," Sloane said smoothly, "and a witness to this being one of the safest homes I've ever stayed in." Dana's pen hovered. "Witness." Sloane met her gaze head-on. "That's what I said." Dana made another note. The inspection moved quickly, too quickly, and when she left, her polite smile didn't quite reach her eyes. As the door shut, Sloane crossed her arms. "She's not writing this evaluation on what she saw. She's writing it on orders." Miles nodded once. "Then we make sure the truth's harder to ignore than the orders." Sloane tilted her head. "You always fight this quiet noise makes people miss what matters," he said again. But this time she understood exactly what he meant. The rain had returned with a vengeance, drumming against the basement windows like impatient fingers. Miles was in the kitchen checking the latch on the back door when he caught it, a sound that didn't belong. A faint scrape metal against metal from the hallway outside his apartment. He moved quietly, switching off the main light. The shadows deepened, hiding him as he stepped to the door and pressed his ear to it. Another sound. Slow footsteps. Too slow for a neighbor coming home too heavy for Mrs. Torres. Sloane came out of Lily's room holding a book she'd been reading to pass the time. Her voice was a whisper. "What is it? Stay here," he murmured. He slipped the deadbolt back without a sound, then cracked the door open half an inch. The hallway was dim, lit only by the flicker of a dying bulb. At the far end, a figure stood just beyond the reach of the light shoulders, hunched head turned toward his door. Miles stepped into the hall, leaving the door ajar. "You lost." The figure startled, then turned, face shadowed by a hood. Looking for the stairs, the man said, voice too smooth. Miles's gaze flicked to the man's left hand, where something metallic glinted between his fingers. "You're 2 floors too low, and that's not a key." The man shifted his weight. Miles took another step forward, angling toward the security camera mounted at the corner of the ceiling. "You want to find your way out," Miles said, voice steady. "Turn left, or I'll make sure Officer Reyes finds his way here instead." The man hesitated, then slipped past him without meeting his eyes. Miles watched until he heard the exit door click shut. He turned to the camera, noting the red light blinking, recording. Inside, Sloane was waiting, arms folded. That wasn't a neighbor. "No," he agreed. "And now we've got his face on tape." The next day, Hattie met them in the parking garage beneath Whitaker Tower. "You're sure about this?" she asked, eyes scanning the corners. Sloane adjusted her coat. "If we want the truth, we have to go where it lives. The truth lives in a locked room guarded by 2 security doors and a man named Gary who never misses lunch," Miles said. "Lucky for us, I know Gary's lunch schedule." They moved quickly, Miles leading them through the back corridor service hallways that smelled faintly of floor cleaner and old paper. At the first security door, Gary was indeed gone. Miles swiped his janitor's badge and pushed through. Inside the data vault, the air was cool and dry, the hum of servers filling the silence like the heartbeat of the building. Sloane stepped to the main console, fingers flying over the keys. "The file name we're looking for is shadowledger.xlsx. Hattie stood watch at the door. 2 minutes max. Sloane found it buried deep in a hidden folder time-stamped the night of the fire. She copied it to a secure drive, her jaw tight. "Got it. Then we're gone," Miles said. They slipped out the way they'd come, merging into the lunchtime crowd in the lobby. No one gave them a second glance. That afternoon, the boardroom smelled of polished wood and money. 12 leather chairs surrounded a table that had seen more power plays than a championship game. Sloane sat across from Eleanor Pike, the chairwoman whose eyes missed nothing. Eleanor leaned back, steepling her fingers. "You asked for this meeting. Convince me it's worth my time." Sloane set the drive on the table. "That file contains proof that Victor has been running unreported expenses through shell accounts for the last 18 months. It also links him to the maintenance contract for the building's fire systems, the same contract that failed the night of the fire." Eleanor didn't reach for the drive. "And you have this how I have friends who know where the hinges are loose," Sloane said. A muscle in Eleanor's jaw twitched. "You've always been efficient at solving problems. Sometimes too efficient. Why should I believe this isn't another one of your tidy cover-ups? Because this time I'm not cleaning up, I'm exposing," Sloane said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. "And because I know what it costs to stay silent when you should speak." Eleanor studied her for a long moment, then nodded to the drive. "I'll review it. If it's what you say, Victor won't last the week." Sloane stood. "You have 48 hours before he moves to erase the trail. Use them." In the elevator down, Sloane exhaled slowly. Miles stood beside her, one hand in his pocket, the other holding the strap of his work bag. "You think she'll do the right thing?" he asked. "She'll do the thing that keeps her in control," Sloane said. "This time, that happens to be the right thing." The elevator stopped at the lobby doors, sliding open to the murmur of voices. As they stepped out, a group of former employees, people Sloane hadn't seen since the last round of layoffs, stood near the entrance. One of them, a man in a worn jacket, called out, "We read the story." "Sloane." "We believe you." Others nodded, murmuring agreement. Sloane froze, the words sinking deeper than she expected. She managed a small smile. "Thank you." As they walked toward the exit, Miles glanced at her. "Community's a funny thing. Sometimes it shows up when you stop trying to deserve it." She looked at him. And sometimes it shows up because someone wouldn't let you walk alone. The rain outside was steady, but for the first time in days it didn't feel like something to endure. It felt like a clean start waiting to be taken. The stairwell smelled faintly of concrete dust and floor polish, the kind of scent that clung to old buildings. Miles led the way up his boots, striking a steady rhythm on the metal steps. Sloane trailed him, her breath even, but her mind running in a dozen directions. "You ever take the elevator?" she asked, mostly to fill the space. He didn't look back. "Only when I'm carrying something I can't afford to drop," she smirked. "And right now," he said, pausing to glance over his shoulder, "you're safer learning the stairs. Elevators give you one way in and one way out. Stairs give you choices." There was more weight in the sentence than she expected. Is this a building safety lesson or life advice? Both. He pushed the next door open, holding it just long enough for her to pass. "You've been fighting in rooms with one door for too long. Learn another way out." They emerged into a quiet service corridor just off the main lobby. Sloane smoothed her jacket, shifting her focus. This wasn't the boardroom she'd once ruled over. This was a shareholders' public forum. No polished mahogany table, no controlled agenda, just a hall full of investors with questions sharp enough to draw blood. Inside, the hum of low conversation stilled as people noticed her. The murmur rippled, some curious, some skeptical. On the dais at the front, Victor Lang sat with two other board members. He smiled when he saw her, but it was the kind of smile that measured the distance to the nearest exit. The moderator cleared his throat. "Ms. Whitaker, you requested time to address the shareholders. You may proceed." Sloane stepped forward, her heels clicking against the stage. She didn't use the podium. She wanted nothing between her and the room. "I've spent years telling you that the strength of this company is built on trust," she began. Last week, that trust was set on fire, literally. A ripple of uneasy laughter. "And while the official investigation is still in progress, I have seen enough to know that what happened was not an accident. Our systems were tampered with. Not by outsiders, but by someone who knows this company inside and out." From the corner of her eye, she saw Victor's jaw tighten. "I have here," she said, lifting a folder. "Financial records showing millions routed through shell accounts tied directly to our CFO's department. And I have time-stamped maintenance logs connecting those accounts to the very systems that failed the night of the fire." The air in the room shifted, small gasps, murmurs. Victor rose, voice smooth as oil. "And I have here," he said, holding up his tablet video, "evidence that Miss Whitaker has been compromised. Evidence of her engaging in conduct unbecoming of a CEO with a member of the building's custodial staff, no less." Gasps again, louder this time. He tapped the screen. Behind him, on the large display, a still frame appeared, Sloane in the rain, leaning into Miles's arm outside the building, hair-damp expression unreadable. Sloane's heart stuttered, but Miles didn't move from where he stood at the back of the room. Victor spread his hands. "You can believe her story, or you can believe your own eyes." From the side of the hall, a voice cut through the tension. "We believe her." Heads turned. A man in a worn jacket stepped forward, one of the laid-off employees who'd spoken to her in the lobby days ago. "We know what it looks like to be set up, and we know who's been playing this game too long." Another voice joined in, then another. "She stood up for us when no one else would. She didn't torch her own building. Use your heads." The swell of support surprised even Sloane. She caught Miles's gaze across the room. He gave the smallest nod as if to say, "That's the sound of a door you didn't know you had opening." The moderator banged his gavel for order. Eleanor Pike, sitting 2 seats from Victor, leaned forward. 48 hours, she said firmly. "The audit committee will review the evidence and report back. Until then, no further action will be taken against Ms. Whitaker." Victor started to protest, but she silenced him with a glance. "You'll have your chance to respond, Mr. Lang, but so will she." The meeting broke with a tension that didn't dissipate so much as shift into a different kind of current, one that carried both risk and possibility. Back in the stairwell, Sloane leaned against the cool concrete wall, letting out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "Nice save in there," Miles said. "Which part?" "The part where you didn't let him see you flinch," he said. "People remember that more than they remember the words." She studied him for a moment. "What would you have done if they'd believed him?" "Same thing I'm going to do now," he replied. "Make sure you're ready for the next fight." She gave a short laugh. "You talk like you've been in this war longer than I have." "I have," he said simply. "Different battlefield, same rules." They started down the stairs together. At the landing, she glanced sideways at him. "Earlier, you told me stairs give you choices. What if all the doors are locked? Then you make your own," he said, "and you don't wait for permission." Outside, the rain had eased to a fine mist, the city lights smearing gold and red across the wet pavement. For the first time in a long while, Sloane felt like maybe she had more than one way forward. The first scream of the sirens sliced through the quiet like a blade. Miles had been half asleep on the couch, Lily curled against him when the flashing red washed over the living room walls. He sat up instantly. "Stay here, baby," he murmured, but Lily clung tighter. Before he could answer her trembling question, "What's happening?" His phone buzzed. It was Hattie. "They've issued a warrant for Victor Lang," she said, her voice sharp, urgent. "But he's not going quietly. 2 unmarked sedans were spotted near your block about 15 minutes ago. Get out. Now." Miles's chest tightened. "You think they're here for me? I think they'll use whatever leverage they can, including your daughter." That was all he needed to hear. "We're leaving." The rain was relentless, hammering the street in icy sheets. Miles had Lily's small backpack slung over his shoulder, his arm firmly around her as they darted down an alley. He wasn't heading toward the busier streets. He knew that's where anyone would look first. Instead, he cut through backyard's chain-link fences rattling in the wind. Lily shivered. "Where are we going, Daddy?" "To a place no one thinks to find us." The old wood shop stood at the far end of an abandoned lane, its faded sign barely legible: Whitaker & Sons. Fine craft since 1942. The place had been shuttered for over a decade, dust settling like a second skin over everything. Miles had worked here once when he was barely out of high school. He still had the keys. Inside, the smell of sawdust clung stubbornly to the air. He guided Lily behind a stack of unused planks. "We'll stay here until it's safe." She nodded, trying to be brave. "Like hide and seek," he kissed her hair. "Exactly like that, only this time we don't want to be found." Hours blurred into the low hum of rain on the roof. Miles kept the lights off, ears tuned to every sound beyond the walls. It wasn't until close to midnight that the faint crunch of tires on wet gravel made his pulse spike. He reached for the old mallet on the workbench, motioning for Lily to stay hidden. Footsteps approached slow and deliberate. Then a voice. Miles. Victor Lang's voice. Miles stepped into the open mallet, loose at his side but ready. "You lost." "Victor." Victor stood just beyond the threshold, soaked through, but wearing the kind of smile that didn't match the night's chaos. "They're saying I'm a criminal," Victor said almost conversationally. "They're saying I burned down my own building, and maybe I did. Maybe I didn't." "You came here to confess." Miles's tone was cold. "No, I came here because I know you'll understand something they never will." Victor's eyes flicked toward the corner where Lily was hidden. "You'd do anything to protect her." "I'd do the same for my son." Miles's grip tightened on the mallet. "That your excuse for destroying other people's lives. Protecting yours." Victor's smile faltered, replaced by something almost human. Tired even. "You don't know what it's like to watch your kid get swallowed by a system that doesn't care if he breathes or not." "I know what it's like to fight that system without turning into it," Miles shot back. "That's the difference between us." Victor's gaze lingered on him for a long beat. Then the distant wail of sirens cut through again, closer this time. His head turned toward the sound. "They'll be here any minute," Miles said. "You can walk out with your hands up or you can run, but if you try to go through me..." His stance shifted, a silent warning. Victor's mouth twitched in a grim half-smile. "You'd make a good chess player, Miles. Always thinking 2 moves ahead." He stepped back into the rain shadow, swallowing him as the sirens grew louder. 5 minutes later, headlights swept across the lane. But it wasn't the police, it was Sloane. She jumped from her SUV, rain plastering her hair to her face. "Miles," she called, spotting him in the doorway. "Get in, now." He hesitated only long enough to scoop Lily into his arms. "You shouldn't be here." "Neither should you," she shot back, opening the back door. "But we don't have time to argue. Those sirens aren't just for Victor. They'll want everyone connected to him, including you if he points the right finger." They piled in. The moment the door shut, Sloane floored it, the SUV's tires hissing over the slick asphalt. From the back seat, Lily whispered, "Daddy, are we running away?" Miles glanced at Sloane, then back at his daughter. "No, baby. We're running toward something safer." Sloane met his eyes in the rearview mirror, and for the first time that night a flicker of relief passed between them. But as the city lights thinned behind them, neither could shake the knowledge that the night wasn't over, only paused. Somewhere out there, Victor was still moving his pieces, and the real checkmate hadn't yet been played. The morning broke with a pale, reluctant sun over Seattle, as if even the sky hesitated to reveal what this day would bring. Miles stood by the kitchen window in Sloane's condo, watching the light spill over the streets below. Lily was asleep in the guest room, curled beneath a quilt that smelled faintly of lavender. Sloane entered quietly, her hair still damp from the shower, a mug of coffee in each hand. "You didn't sleep," she said, setting one in front of him. He took it, nodding toward the city skyline. "Feels like the whole place is holding its breath." Before she could answer, Sloane's phone buzzed on the counter. It was Hattie. "Tell me you're somewhere safe." Hattie's voice crackled through the speaker. "We are," Sloane replied. "What's going on?" "I'm publishing in an hour," Hattie said. "Everything. The sabotage, the Shadow Ledger files, the whistleblower votes. It's airtight. But you should know once this goes live, Victor has no reason to hold back. If he's desperate, he might try to drag either of you into the mud with him. Do it," Miles said, his voice steady. "Let the truth burn brighter than his lies." By mid-morning, the article was everywhere: news sites, social media feeds, even the TV in the cafe below Sloane's building. The headline read, "Victor Lang's Empire, Built on Lies' Internal Files. Reveal Decade of Fraud." Footage rolled of employees leaving Whitaker Holdings headquarters, some crying, others hugging. In one clip, a man in a worn jacket looked straight at the camera and said, "Victor thought he could scare us into silence. He forgot the power of people who have nothing left to lose." Sloane exhaled slowly. "I know him. He's not going to accept this quietly." Miles's phone rang. It was Eleanor Victor's sister. "They've cornered him at the ferry terminal," she said. "SWAT's on scene. If you want closure, you should be here." The terminal smelled of salt and diesel, the gulls wheeling overhead like they knew something was about to change. Miles, Sloane, and Lily stayed just beyond the police barricade, the cold wind whipping at their faces. Across the lot, Victor stood beside a black SUV, his hands raised, but his eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on them. Even at this distance, Miles could see the smirk. When the officers closed in, Victor called out not to the police, but to Miles. "You think you've won." His voice cut through the chaos. "You only win when you get to keep what matters most. Protect her janitor, because power's not the only thing people steal." The words hung in the air as they cuffed him, and for a fleeting second Miles thought he saw something in Victor's face that wasn't mockery, maybe regret, maybe warning. Then he was gone, pushed into the back of a squad car. That afternoon, Eleanor met them in her quiet, book-lined office. She looked at Sloane, her expression softer than it had been in months. "The board has voted," Eleanor said. "Victor's out, but so is the offer for you to return." Sloane didn't flinch. "I don't want it. I'm not here to rebuild an empire. I want to build something that won't need an empire to stand." Eleanor nodded slowly. "Then you'll have our support, just not our money." Miles glanced at Sloane, a small smile tugging at his mouth. "Sometimes that's the best way to start." Later, in the fading light of the day, they stood outside the courthouse where Miles's custody hearing had been rescheduled. The judge's ruling was quick. "Given recent testimony and evidence of stability, I'm granting primary custody to Mr. Miles Carter." Lily threw her arms around him the second they stepped onto the sidewalk. "Does this mean I'm staying with you forever?" Miles crouched to her level, his throat tight. Forever and a day, kiddo. Sloane stood a few steps away, watching with an expression that was equal parts joy and something more private. You fight for the people you love, she said quietly when he joined her, and somehow you still have enough left to fight for strangers, too. Miles shrugged. Maybe that's how you make sure you're never truly alone. She looked at him for a long moment, then smiled. Not the sharp, guarded smile she'd worn when they met, but something warmer. You're coming with me, she said softly, the words landing like a promise. He chuckled. Where to this time? You'll see, she replied, and for the first time in months, Miles let himself believe that maybe, just maybe the worst was behind them. But in the quiet ride back as Lily hummed in the back seat and the city lights began to glow, both knew the fight had only changed shape. The truth had found daylight, but daylight didn't last forever. What they did next would decide whether it burned out or lit the way forward. The first warm day of spring spilled sunlight across Whitaker Street as if the city itself had been waiting for this moment. The old post office, long abandoned and graffitied, now stood transformed, its brick facade scrubbed clean windows, repaired the carved letters above the door, repainted in gold Whitaker Community Hub. Miles stood on the sidewalk with Lily, a set of keys warm in his palm. He'd been here every weekend for months, building, painting, sanding down rough edges both on the building and in ways he didn't talk about inside himself. Sloane joined them, carrying a cardboard box full of books. She was in jeans and a white button-down sleeves rolled to the elbows, hair catching the sunlight. I think this is the last load, she said a little breathless. You sure? Miles asked with a half smile. I heard you've got a warehouse of these. She tilted her head. You planning to help carry them, janitor? I thought that was my unofficial title. Today, I'm key holder. He dangled the keys with a playful glint in his eyes. Inside, the place smelled faintly of fresh paint and cedar. Children's laughter drifted from the back room where volunteers set up tables for an after-school program. Mrs. Torres, their neighbor, supervised a group arranging donated clothes on racks. A young man in a wheelchair rolled past with a tray of sandwiches. This is what you built, Sloane said quietly, standing beside Miles. Not just walls and windows. This feels alive. He looked around, taking in the bustle. It's not mine, it's theirs. I just gave it a door they could walk through. Sloane's gaze lingered on him, her voice soft but deliberate. Doors can change a life, Miles. I should know. Someone once pulled me through one when I couldn't see the way out. Before he could reply, a group of ex-Whitaker employees entered, still in their old navy blue jackets. One of them, a tall woman with streaks of gray in her hair, approached Sloane. You probably don't remember me. I was in accounting. I just wanted to say thank you. Not for taking Victor down, but for showing up here today. It means something. Sloane nodded, her throat tightening. It means something to me, too. Later, the crowd gathered outside for the ribbon cutting. Eleanor stood at the podium, her pearl necklace catching the sun. She looked out at the assembled neighbor city officials and volunteers. Today isn't about what was taken from this community, Eleanor began, but about what we can build when no one is left outside the door. She stepped back, gesturing for Miles to come forward. He cleared his throat, scanning the crowd until his eyes found Lily, who stood holding the oversized scissors. This place, he began, is proof that people can surprise you. Sometimes the ones you least expect to change things do. And sometimes the person who needs a place the most is the one who ends up building it. Lily grinned and cut the ribbon. The cheers that followed felt like they vibrated in his chest. As the event wound down, Miles and Sloane found themselves leaning against the brick wall near the entrance. The late afternoon sun had turned the sky into a wash of gold and rose. So, Miles said, you pulled me into your storm that night. Now what? Sloane looked at him, her eyes warm but unwavering. Now, I'm asking you to step into mine. Not the storm, the life I want to build. With you. He blinked, his voice rougher than he intended. You sure you want a janitor in that picture? Her lips curved into that half-smile he'd come to know. I don't see a janitor. I see the man who walked into a burning building for a stranger who fought for a little girl's future and who turned an empty shell into a place where people belong. You're coming with me, Miles Carter. Not because I need saving, because I want a home. and I think we've both found the doorway to it." For a long moment, neither spoke. The sounds of laughter and music from inside drifted out, blending with the hum of the city. Finally, Miles nodded. "Then let's keep the door open." Sloane reached for his hand, and this time he didn't hesitate. As they walked back inside, Mrs. Torres passed them, smiling knowingly. "Took you too long enough," she teased. Lily darted over, tugging on their joined hands. "Come on, we're painting the last wall in the reading room." Miles laughed, letting her pull them forward, and as they crossed the threshold into the bright, bustling hub, he realized that some doors once opened never truly closed. Snow fell in slow, lazy spirals, each flake catching the warm glow of the street lamps as if it had nowhere else in the world to be. The Whitaker Community Hub, once an empty brick shell, now pulsed with life-golden light spilling from its windows, laughter ringing from inside. Miles stood at the doorway, one hand in his coat pocket, the other holding Lily's mittened hand. She bounced on her toes, her cheeks flushed pink from the cold. Sloane approached from behind, her breath clouding the air. "You know," she said softly, "I've stood in front of a lot of buildings I thought were important. None of them felt like this." Miles smiled, eyes still fixed on the light spilling onto the snow. "That's because those were buildings. This..." He gestured toward the crowd inside. "This is home." They stepped in together. The hum of conversation wrapped around them like a blanket. Neighbors exchanged stories. Kids darted between tables stacked with cookies and cocoa. Mrs. Torres waved them over her apron dusted with flour. "You two," she said, wagging her spoon. "Don't think I haven't noticed the way you've been looking at each other for months. About time this place got some new family traditions." Lily giggled. "We're starting tonight," she declared. "We're doing Christmas here every year." Sloane crouched to meet her eye. "Every year, huh?" "That's a big promise." "Some promises," Lily said with the serious weight of a child who has learned life's fragility, "you keep no matter what." The words hit Miles in the chest. He reached out and gently squeezed her shoulder. "I think we can manage that." At the far end of the hall, Eleanor stood near the stage greeting guests. When she caught sight of Sloane, her expression softened, no corporate mask, no guarded distance. Just a sister who had fought battles beside her. Eleanor walked over, slipping her arm around Sloane's shoulders. Victor's serving his time. The board's rebuilding with people who actually care. "And you..." She looked between Sloane and Miles. "You've got more important work here." For the first time, Sloane didn't feel the tug of the boardroom calling her back. The urgency she'd once lived by had been replaced by something steadier, more enduring. As the evening went on, the hum quieted for a moment when Mrs. Torres tapped a glass with her spoon. "Speech," she called. "We want to hear from the man who wouldn't stop fixing things even when no one was watching." The crowd turned to Miles. He cleared his throat, tugging at his sleeve like a man who'd rather be fixing a broken chair than standing in the spotlight. "I don't have much," he began, "except gratitude. For every person who showed up when they didn't have to. For every hand that lifted when things felt too heavy. And for the reminder that sometimes the walls we build aren't meant to keep people out, but to give them something to gather inside of." There was a stillness after he spoke, the kind that makes you realize everyone in the room is breathing the same air, sharing the same thought. Sloane stepped forward, then her voice steady. "I once thought home was an address, something you could buy, decorate, and lock at night. But it turns out home is the people who open their door and say." Without hesitation, she turned to Miles, a smile curving her lips. "You're coming with me." The crowd broke into warm applause. Not the polite kind, but the kind that comes from knowing the words are true. Later, as the night wound down, the three of them, Miles, Sloane, and Lily, walked out into the snowy street. The hub's lights glowed behind them, a beacon against the winter night. Lily swung their hands back and forth. "Next year, can we bring even more people?" Sloane laughed. "As many as we can fit." Miles glanced at Sloane, the snow catching in her hair, the reflection of the hub's lights in her eyes. "You ready for that?" She didn't hesitate. I've been ready since the night in that stairwell. I just didn't know it yet. They reached the corner where the street lamp hummed quietly. The world felt small in that moment, just the crunch of their boots, the soft fall of snow, and the shared warmth between them. Sloane slipped her arm through Miles's. "Let's go home." And for once, home didn't mean a place. It meant this three people walking into a future they hadn't planned, but one they'd chosen together. Somewhere behind them, the Whitaker Community Hub kept glowing, holding space for all the stories yet to be told. And in the quiet of the falling snow, it was clear the best doors in life are the ones you open together. And that is how a single act of kindness turned into a lifetime of home. It's a reminder that sometimes the people we least expect end up being the ones who change our story forever. Now, I want to hear from you. Where are you listening from tonight? Drop your city, your country, or maybe even your own story in the comments below. I'd love to know where our little storytelling family reaches. If this story touched your heart, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Every week, we share tales of love, hope, and second chances. Stories that remind us of the goodness still in the world. Thank you truly for spending this time with me. Your presence here means more than you know. Until we meet again, take care of your heart and never stop believing in the doors that open when you need them most.